It's 6:30. Folks in the control room there, are we ready to go live?
We are ready and we're live.
Super, thanks very much. Hello everybody, welcome. Good evening. My name is Dean McKinley. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for the Sunshine Coast Regional District, and I've been happy to be a Sunshine Coast resident now for nearly 6 months. And so far my family and I absolutely love it here. And I'm really happy to be here tonight as part of this Let's Talk Water event. We know there's been a lot of questions and concerns about water rates on the Sunshine Coast, and tonight's a really good opportunity to share some information with you and to have some respectful dialogue back and forth with you, and to answer a number of questions and hopefully give you a better understanding of how the water rates work, why there's been increases, what you're buying with those increases, and to help to put it in context. The first thing I'd like to do, if I could, is just open this evening's session by acknowledging that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the traditional territories of the Shishel Nation and the Squamish Nation. I can give you a quick rundown for how things are going to go tonight. I wanted to quickly introduce the panelists that we have with us. First, we have Chair Lori Pratt, Area B Half Moon Bay Director. We have Her Worship Mayor Darnelda Seegers, Vice Chair and Mayor of Sechelt. And we've got Donna McMahon, Director McMahon, Area E Director from Elphinstone. We also have some staff with us. Tina Perot, our Chief Financial Officer, is here. And Remco Rosenblum, our General Manager of Infrastructure, is here. And they're going to be doing some of the heavy lifting with your questions as directed by Chair Pratt. The way tonight's session is going to go is we're going to have some opening remarks from our chair. And then Remco's got a bit of a slide presentation that helps to put some of the water rates and the projects and different things into context. That's probably going to run for about 20 minutes, the presentation. And then we've got plenty of time for any questions that you have. The instructions for asking questions were provided as part of the meeting invite. Chair Pratt will sort of help to moderate that section. If there are written questions that we can't get to before we wrap up, one of the things we recognize is that we'll be making sure that we provide answers to those questions and post those questions and answers on our website at the end of the session. We're looking forward to tonight's session. A couple of things to remember. We've never done this before in this format. We've tried very hard to put things in place to help it go really smoothly tonight, but we recognize there could be a few glitches along the way. And we really appreciate your patience. The one thing is, as you virtually raise your hands to ask your questions, once you've had your question answered, or if someone else answers the question that you wanted to ask, if you could just lower your hands, that would be super helpful. And with that, why don't I turn it over to Chair Pratt for some opening remarks. And just once again, thanks everybody for coming, and we really look forward to having a good session tonight. Chair Pratt.
Terrific. Thank you, CAO McKinley. It is truly my pleasure to be here this evening. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. We welcome you from across the Sunshine Coast, the traditional territories of the Squamish and the Sechelt First Nations, and we're very grateful to be here. I'd like to acknowledge some of our other elected officials. We have, as CAO McKinley said, on our panel tonight, we have myself, Darnelda Seegers, the Mayor of Sechelt, and also the Vice Chair of the Sunshine Coast Regional District. And then we also have Director McMahon. Donna hails from us from Area E in Elphinstone, and very happy to have them joining me on the panel. We also have some of our other elected joining us within the audience. From the District of Sechelt, I've seen Brenda Rowe and Matt McLean, who are both councillors there, and I believe Janice Kuster is there as well. And then we also have Alton Toth, who also sits at the SCRD table as a director. From the town of Gibsons, we have David Kroll, who also sits at the SCRD table as a director. And from the Sunshine Coast Regional District, Area A, we have Leonard Lee. And from Area D, Roberts Creek, we have Andreas Ties. So thank you all to our other elected who have joined us this evening. And I'd like to also acknowledge the staff that are with us tonight. we've had CEO McKinley, and then we also have GM of Infrastructure Services, Remco Rosenboom. We also have all of our fantastic IT staff, headed up by Bryce Vignan, and I saw Chris was in there as well. And then we've also got all of our other staff that are helping to answer questions. And thank you very much for all being here this evening. So tonight is an evening to talk about water. In preparation for tonight's event, I reviewed our board's message to our community from last year's Water Dialogue series. Last year, I stood here and on behalf of the board, took responsibility for the water situation our community is in. As a board, we continue to not only take responsibility, but also take action on multiple fronts to increase and protect this precious resource. While we have made significant steps toward adding sources, mitigating leaks, and adding water-saving rebate programs to during the past 12 months, we are anticipating another year of strict water conservation measures. Our snowpack, while slightly higher than last year, is still below average. We are in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is adding to water consumption through frequent hand washing and sanitization, and the increased installation of home gardens for food production. Your SCRD board has committed to communicating to you and listening to your concerns, addressing your questions, and keeping you informed. We realize that we should have provided additional information with your utility bills that came out earlier this spring, addressing the increased rates, information on projects and their associated costs, and how those projects were being reflected on your bills. Increases to utility bills and taxes are never convenient, and in a time of global economic distress due to a worldwide pandemic, many have communicated that these increases have felt unfair and punitive. While the water that falls from the sky is free, delivering potable drinking water to homes and businesses is not. Increasing infrastructure costs, aging water mains and pump stations, climate change, and the need to increase our supply now have stressed financial capabilities. The SCRD board has heard loud and clear over the past number of months how crucial it is to deal with the water issue and no longer kick it down the road. It is key throughout our strategic plan. So this evening is for you. Please ask your questions, voice your concerns. I have Darnelda Seegers, Mayor of Sechelt and Vice Chair of the SCRD Board, and Donna McMahon, Rural Director for Area E, Elphinstone, and Chair of the Infrastructure Services Committee here to assist with questions, as well as several SCRD staff will also be available. I'll now like to pass it over to our staff at this point. GM Remco Rosenboom will be addressing the current projects that the SCRD has in progress during his presentation. And with that, over to you, GM Rosenboom.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to share my screen. And there we go. So what will be the topic of tonight? I will start with a little bit more background on what is your utility bill, what is being paid from the taxes we collect with our utility bills, how are they set, and how can residents be informed about when they are set. And then I'm going to talk about what is the status of SCRD water funding compared to those of other local governments, and talk about the role of water supply in our SCRD 2019-2023 strategic plan. I'm going to give an overview of the water projects that are currently being funded in 2020 and a quick outlook of what to be expect for 2020 rates. And there will be included in this presentation some information on if there's any questions about the payments of this year's utility bills. So what is a utility bill, and what is the difference between a utility bill and a property tax? Utility bills are sent in April by the SCRD, and they cover water, wastewater, as well as the user fees and frontage fees for wastewater, as well as user fees for the curbside collection of solid waste. Property tax notices are sent in June by the province, or the municipality, depending on if you live in an electoral area or in a municipality. And in terms of water and solid waste, they raise funds for major repairs, replacements, and construction of new infrastructure, and for solid waste on all kind of waste diversion and disposal programs. The property taxes also include all kind of other taxes for recreational purposes, parks, etc., etc. So the utility bills is something that the SCRD is sending out in April, and where the property taxes are sent out by the province and municipality later this year. So what are the fees and parcel taxes this year? They're presented on this slide, and while the increases, primarily the increases are on the user fees this year, and to a lesser degree on the parcel taxes, especially for North Pender area, the increase is totally on the user fee, and I will talk later on in the presentation on why. If you look at the total per year, you can see that the regional water service, the total amount you pay per year is the lowest, while in South Pender it is the highest. So what about the other rates on my bill? We have the refuse collection, the garbage collection. It increased by $21.60, and that has to do with the fact that this fall there will be an introduction of a curbside food collection program, and for the wastewater rates, they also increased for most of the areas, and how much they increased it varies per wastewater system, but the residents that are on those systems have received communication from SCRD about that in December, in January, and more will to come later this year. So this presentation, I will primarily focus on the water supply situation itself. But when are these rates actually set? They are part of our annual budgeting process. And as part of the process, there's a confirmation of our base budget, which is funding our recurring cost. And we have our one-time projects. And this presentation will give an overview of later on of the one-time projects related to water supply and water infrastructure. So last year in October, we started with presenting the budget proposals to the board. In December, we discussed a first round. We had a first round of detailed discussions with the board, which resulted in January, by the end of January, to have the confirmation of the water rates for 2020. The reason why they were approved at that time is because by legislation, we need to get them approved as early in the year as possible. Then we had a second round of detailed discussions on some additional proposals, and in early March 12th, the 2020 budget was finally in its final version adopted by the board, and that included the determination of the parcel taxes for this year. In response to the COVID crisis and the financial impact on it will have on our community, the board decided to amend the project and to reduce the total taxation, which resulted in a revision of the parcel tax numbers for this year. So what about the payment options? The deadline is June 15th, and the question we received a lot over the last several weeks was, can I install in payments? Yes, you can. That can be done through My SCRD, through online banking, and by providing post-dated checks. Currently, there is a late payment penalty if the bill is paid later than June 15th. However, this Thursday, the board will confirm to postpone that payment until September 30. So that would give everybody a bit more time to pay their bills this year. However, any unpaid bills that are still existing at the end of this year will be transferred to the property taxes for next year. That's something that is outside of the SCRD control. That's a legislative provincial requirement. We also received a lot of questions from residents about how can I be informed about next year's utility bills, and or how could I be informed about what the user fees and parcel taxes would be this year. All budget meetings are open to the public. The SCRD is frequently sending out newsletters and did provide an update on the budgeting process on the website and social media. All the recordings, just like this one, of our meetings are available on the SCRD YouTube channel. Local media have frequently reported, and we provide them with sufficient information so that they continue to be able to report on this budgeting process. And some of our directors have newsletters, blogs, and provide information in presentations they provide. We acknowledge that mid-March, when we adopted the final budget for this year, that coincided with the declaration of the COVID pandemic, and that really overshadowed our planned communication around this year's budget. So we really recognize that our communication was planned to be better and should be better next year. If you compare our rates with those of some other local governments, there is clear insight that they are not one of the top ones in our region. This is an overview of the water user fees in our region, and you can see that regional water is in the lower, is amongst the lower fees, while the South Pender one is in the middle category, and Vernon, Cathet, which is Powell River, and West Vancouver are really on the higher side in terms of their user fees for this year. So it's clear that there is a wide range of between the city of Nanaimo and West Vancouver, and part of it has to do with the scale of the systems. The larger the systems, usually the lower the rates. But there are multiple factors here at play. But the regional water system, regional and North Pender systems are still pretty affordable if compared to others. In 2015, a study confirmed that most water providers in BC are underfunded in terms of the funds they actually need to provide good water and sewer services to the communities. And that's a 2015 study, and but we're convinced that that's definitely still true for the majority of the communities in BC, as well as for the SCRD. And smaller communities have bigger financial gaps compared to larger one in terms of the amount they are underfunded. So what are the current challenges for the SCRD in terms of funding? We require funds for more and more funds because our infrastructure is aging and in need of major repairs or replacement. And just like I indicated, that is the case for several other local governments in BC, there is still some underfunding of our daily operations, maintenance, and repairs. What are the funds available? Because there are so many funds, so many local governments that are short in capital to do major repairs and replacements, there is a strong competition with grants. Most local governments are in that position that they're looking for grants to get the work done. Just like a lot of others, our reserves, our savings are not sufficient to do a lot of those major repairs. And at the same time, we're still paying for some long-term loans we took in the last several decades. For example, in 2004, we constructed the Chapman Creek water treatment plant, and we're still paying back our loan for that. And so the long-term loans will be also based on the current situation, the funding source for future water supply projects. More on that later. So last year, the board adopted the 2019-2023 strategic plan. In terms of water supply, it has 4 objectives set. One is to address the backlog in repair and replacement of current infrastructure and to make sure that we have sustainable funding models in place to continue to do that moving forward. Second one is, as Chair Pratt just acknowledged, to address the current water supply now, as soon as possible. The third one is to prepare for future water supply expansions. Climate change is not going to reduce our water supply needs in any way in the future decades. So we need to start planning now on how to ensure that the community still receives enough water in 10, 15 years from now. The strategic plan also indicates that the approach taken to do this is that that's going to happen in an engaged manner, engaged with the public. I think this event tonight is an example of that. The board would like to do that in a respectful manner, respectful to interests of other people, interests of other local governments, and but at the same time, they want to be bold and deliberate in their decision making towards actually creating action and creating progress. 2020 is the first year of the implementation of this plan, and many initiatives have therefore been started or expected or expedited as part of this budget process, plus the 2020 budget process, and are hence included in our financial plan. A lot of the actual results are to be expected in next year or the year after. This year we'll try to achieve some results, but most outcomes of the actions taken this year will come in the years to come. So in terms of water supply, we have 3 major functions, service areas, where all the funds collected from residents and businesses within those areas are paying for the actual service of the water supply, provision of the water supply in those areas. So we have the North Spender system, we have the South Spender system, and we have what we call the regional water system that includes the areas Cove Cay and Egmont, then the Langdale, Soames, Granthams, and Eastbourne water systems. So in terms of how is the money being spent, this year we're spending about 185,000 on maintenance and small repairs as part of the new budget. 3 million and a bit, 3.4 million on major repairs and replacements, and over 60 million is included in the budget for water supply expansion projects. And I will go in further in the upcoming slides. I will break this down into more details. So in terms of the North Spender system, about 22,500 is going to be spent on maintenance and small repairs. For the South Spender system, that's 25,000, and for the regional water system, it's hard to see, but it's a small sliver. It's 137,500. It's clear that in the regional water system, the majority of the funds are being spent on water supply expansion, and a fair amount also on major repairs and replacement, while in North and South Spender, water supply expansion is a small piece of the pie, and the majority is being spent on major repairs and replacements. So what are some of the projects that are being funded this year? There is increased funds allocated for archaeological work during construction projects, our safety protocols for entering small spaces, confined spaces, like pump stations and valves. Those need to be updated. There is additional funding available to install hydrants, fire hydrants in the North and South Spender systems. And there is an increase to our budget to support our day-to-day maintenance of our infrastructure in terms of valve, chemicals, pipings, and couplings. In terms of major repair and replacements, we're doing 3 safety audits on 3 of our dams on our water supply reservoirs, McNeil Lake, Edwards Lake, and Chapman Lake. We are rebuilding our Langdale pump station and our Cove K pump station. They're both urgent need of replacement, so it's almost a complete rebuild of those 2 pump stations. We're doing hydrological modeling for the north and south band systems to be able to use that model for our future planning in terms of water supply for those systems. We're purchasing a backup generator for the Garden Bay pump station in North Bender. We're purchasing all kind of equipment for our South Bender and Chapman Creek water treatment plant. We're updating the minimum flow we need to provide in Chapman Creek in terms of to protect the fish. We're replacing several large valves, which are expensive, and we are replacing several kilometers of water main. In terms of water supply expansion, the good news is we received approval from the province to continue with our public approval to get a long-term loan to start construction of the Church Road well field this fall, late summer, early fall. More on that later. In terms of the installation of the water meters in the Seashore area, the budget indicates that public approval process will be initiated this year, but no direction has been provided by the board yet on how and when to do so. We're also drilling and testing 5 more well sites, so maybe there will be more groundwater wells to be developed in the years to come. We're advancing our raw water reservoir for what we call Site B, more on that later. Our eastbourne water supply system on Keats Island is experiencing water shortages every year, so we're assessing what we can do to increase the water supply there. There's an increased water supply and conservation outreach and public engagement, and we're developing a portal to allow residents to see their actual water meter data if they have a water meter online. How much are we actually short to avoid going to stage 3? By the end of 2018, we estimated that it would be about 2 million cubic meters if we would have a significant drought in our region. The left column is the amount of water we would need in 25 to avoid going to stage 3, and the column to the right indicates the sources and the amount of water we currently have available. So the number of 2 million is what we call the water supply deficit for 2025. In order to address that, we have identified an integrated approach to do so. We're developing new sources like Church Road, the raw water reservoir, and the groundwater exploration round 2, where we are drilling more wells. We are improving our operations, including installation of meters and water main upgrades, and we do all kinds of initiatives around conservation. So as I indicated, the Church Road well field, we've started developing that or working on that back in 2017, and last fall the board decided to continue with the development of this well field, and it would provide with about 40% or at least 40% of the current water supply deficit for 2025. So it would make a huge difference in terms of the amount of water we have available during dry summer. What we need for that is public approval for a long-term loan, and this Thursday the board will decide if that's indeed going to happen this June or July as staff are proposing. If that's the case, the construction can start will start in October, and it might be we are expecting it to be ready to be used next year summer. So it will really already help us with our water supply deficit next year summer. As indicated, we're drilling 5 new wells or several new wells on 5 new sites all over the coast. We hope to get those results back to the board this fall so that future decisions can be made on next steps. That means that construction can start in 2022 on if any of these sites would be suitable as a new water supply source, and we received the provincial permits to do so in time. For 2 years now, we've been working on a raw weather reservoir, a large reservoir in the Chapman Creek watershed to store water in the spring so that we can use it in the summer. At the end of last year, we identified one preferred site and did a cost estimate between 38 and 53 million, but it was all based on desktop studies. So this year we're confirming the soil conditions and confirming the market value of any excavated materials, and we expect that by doing so we can optimize the design and significantly reduce the cost of any such reservoir. Then it will be up to the board to decide if and when they want to move forward with the development, or they would like to hold this project for a while. As indicated, one of the operational development improvements we're working on is an update to our environmental flow needs for Chapman Creek. We currently have a requirement to release minimum amount of water in the lower reaches of Chapman Creek. That's currently set by the province at 200 liters a second, and we're currently assessing if we can lower that to 150 or 180 liters a second during the times when fish are actually not migrating. And we are currently working with the province to get the approval to do the assessment this year so that we can implement it next year. This will give us a reduction in our 2025 water supply deficit of between 5 and 13%. So that's a significant, could be a significant contribution as well. So more clarity to be expected about this fall. Then our water metering program. The program is really intended to support and improve management of our water system. It could create billing equity and water conservation. Currently, early this month, we sent about 195 letters to residents because they had a leak. 195 sounds large, but 2 years ago, we easily sent 400 of the same letters. So the number has dropped, a number of letters, number of leaks identified and on a monthly basis has dropped significantly. Since the start of this program in 2017, we calculated that we identified so many leaks that we've been able to fix, or that residents have fixed about 2 leaks per day since 2017, which is an enormous amount. Some of these leaks are on the same property because there's one leak fixed and then it's reoccurring somewhere else. However, in total, it is an enormous result by the residents together with the SCRD that so many leaks has been identified and fixed. The next steps, as indicated before, is the installation of the meters in Seashield area to expand this program to that area as well, and the development of a portal with water meter data for residents and commercial properties to see their actual water meter reads. However, given that system is not in place yet, that portal, we're still developing it. We started a program where residents can receive by email their monthly water consumption at the end of each month. More information on that is available at our website. In terms of water conservation, we're updating 2 bylaws, a zoning bylaw and a more water-related bylaw to include water conservation measures. We are going to introduce this fall, in collaboration with BC Hydro, a clothes washer rebate program, and we are expanding the rainwater harvesting rebate program that was started last year. More information on these programs is also available on our website. What to expect in future years? As indicated, we started our process this fall, early fall, to work on the budget for next year. So the first budget meetings with our board, which are public, which are open for everybody to participate and watch. They will start this late this summer, early fall, and they will really focus on, as per the strategic plan, on major repairs and replacement of our current water and wastewater infrastructure, the development of our new water supply sources. As the chair indicated, it's such a priority of the board to expedite anything we can in terms of increasing our water supply and reduce our water supply deficit as soon as possible, and at the same time the development of long-term water supply plans to ensure that future generations don't have the similar issues as we are currently facing. As indicated earlier, the reserves we have are not a lot, so we really rely on user fees and parcel taxes to fund these projects, as well as long-term loans and grants. And it will be a combination, again, just like this year, a combination of those four sources of funding that will determine and the mix between them what the rates will be for next year and the year after. But given the investments we need to make, it could very well be that there will be further increases required next year to achieve these objectives. What to expect next? As I indicated, this Thursday, the board will confirm if there will be a deferral of utility bill penalties until September 30. This Thursday, the board hopefully will confirm the timelines for the public approval process for the funding for the Church Road Wellfield. Late this summer, as indicated, we start the 2021 budget process, and this until the end of the year, there will be reports going to the board on the start of the construction of the Church Road Well project, if we got the funding approval, the results of the drilling of 5 new test sites, the update to the environmental flow needs for Chapman Creek, an updated design for the raw water reservoir, and a decision on next steps in terms of the installation of meters in the seashell area. And that was the end of my presentation, and I'm going to turn it back to Chair Pratt to start the discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Remco. It's always amazing to me how much we do have on the go, because as you do this step by step and then you see it all together, there is a tremendous amount that is happening right now, and we're happy to share that all in one place. So with that, we'd like to open it up for questions and comments from our attendees. So I am going to look to our staff in the background and ask if we have any questions that have been submitted. If anybody, you can either raise your hand within the chat function for any of the attendees, or you can type it into the Q&A section or the chat. So
there are currently no raised hands or no written questions to consider.
Okay, I did see a raised hand from Director McMahon though, so we'll go to her first.
Yeah, I thought I'd ask a question, since a constituent asked me this yesterday by email, and that is, how has the COVID-19 crisis affected our water supply usage, particularly in April? Like, what was April 2020 like compared to April 2019?
Over to Remco.
Thank you. I can answer that question. In April, we had a warm spell, and that immediately resulted in a significant increase of our overall water supply. The total water supply in April was 11% higher than it was last year, which was significant. And we suspect that a large amount of that has to do with residents working in their, being at home, working in their gardens, as well as maybe a small percentage due to additional cleaning. However, that I have to acknowledge that trend did not happen as well in May. In May, we were about same or a little bit lower than last year. However, last year we had a really warm May, and this year we had a really cool May. So it could be that any increased water demand this year from residents is just lower because of the lower temperature. People are watering their garden less.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Remco. I'm going to look over to staff, and if there's any questions that you'd, I see we might have a couple there.
So we have a couple written questions. One is from Connie Jordison at the local. Is the SCRD exploring grant possibilities for the Church Road well or the Seashelt water metering expansion projects?
Okay, so the short answer is yes. We for the Church Road well site, and staff will correct me, especially Tina. I know she's online, our CFO. The board did choose to go ahead with the Church Road well site because we didn't want to delay the project anymore before looking at other grants. However, there is also the possibility from the federal government. Our member of parliament has let us know that there may be the opportunity to participate in another couple of grant streams because it is a shovel-ready project. So we're just looking, we're waiting for more details on that. And of course, we have a very active staff when looking at grant opportunities and to see what is available. And I'll look over to any of our staff members if they would like to add into that. CFO, anything to add to that, or does that pretty much summarize it?
No, I think that was a very good summary. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Next up.
Hello, we have a question from D. McCreath. Could you expand on the steps needed to allow start of construction on the well field?
Okay, Remco, because this seems pretty technical, I'll go over to you, please.
Thank you. What is needed is this Thursday, the board will confirm the timeline to start the process to receive public approval for a long-term loan for the project. We currently don't have the savings resource in hand, or we have no grant to initiate the project this fall, so we're seeking public approval to get a long-term loan to fund the project. At the same time, we're finalizing our design and start working on a tendering package so that we can line up a contractor at the same time as receiving the funding approval from the province and from the public, as well as our permits from the province. And I'm really hopeful that we are able to get the design, the permits, and the funding in place at the same time so that we can start the construction early October at the latest.
Okay, so essentially the alternative approval process it's like a reverse vote. So if you have, I believe it's 10% of the population say no, then we can't go ahead with that process. So we'll be discussing it more at the board meeting on Thursday of this week, and that report is already up on the scrd.ca under the agenda section that explains more about the process, and it actually has the timeline right in there. And I hope that answers that question fully.
We have another question, or a few questions here now.
Okay.
One from Matt McLean. I've heard people describe water meters as a cash grab. Could you respond to this?
So for Councillor McLean, I'm going to go over to his mayor, and she can answer that.
Yeah, trust Matt to come out with a question like that. The water meters, typically, I mean, what staff have told us is what we're going to do once we have all of the residents on water meters is we're going to do an assessment period first. So we're going to determine what the base volume of water is that any particular residents would generally use, and that we would set as our base rate. If we go above that, then you would pay for additional water. But the base rate will be set, and the majority of the people typically would stay within that base. And Remco can add anything else that I haven't covered off.
Thank you, Director. I think you did well. What I can share one example from, for example, the District of Mission. They did an analysis last year or several years ago when they introduced, just shortly after they introduced their billing system based on the rate structure based on meters, actual water consumption by residents. And it turns out that 80% of the residents were actually, due to the system, due to the new rate structure, were paying less than previously, and only 20% were paying more. So the vast majority of the residents, it was a financial benefit for them to be part of a metered rate structure, so that they were actually paying for their actual consumption of water.
Okay, and we should point out it is cost recovery. It's not a profit center for collecting and as other utilities may be, but it's definitely it's cost recovery. Okay. Next up, what have we got for our next question, please?
We have a question from Tom regarding the EFN flow study. Why are we only contemplating lowering the flow to 180 or 150 liters per second? Why not also study 120 or 130 liters per second to see if that would be feasible? We will probably only have one shot at approaching the province for a change.
Okay, I will go over to Remco because this is his expertise.
Thank you for the question. It's based on advice we received from our professional biologist, and that's to do with there's still, even though there is no large fish migrating anymore or are not migrating in Chapman Creek prior to late July, early August, there are still juveniles in the creek, and at lower flows, the temperatures lower flows than 150, the temperatures might become too high in the creek to actually support those juveniles to survive. So it's not that there is no fish anymore in the creek prior to August 1st. It's really that there are no large fish. And for the small fish, they still need a good amount of flow to survive there.
Okay, thank you, Remco. Over to our next question, please.
The next question is from Scott. Has there been any conversations about the use of Clos Home area for water?
Okay, so Clos Home is one that has come up a number of times. We currently, the SCRD board is not currently looking at that as an option. We don't have it completely off the table. We're hoping that with the new water, the WASAC, Water Source Advisory Committee, is that the correct acronym, Remco?
Water advisories, yeah.
Yes. We're hoping with that citizens group that they will be able to help us assess some of these other options, and as well as look at additional options. So the short answer is Clos Home is not off the table, but it's not currently being pursued in this budget cycle. And Mayor Seegers?
I think if I look at what we've done as a board, we're looking at two different timelines. One, we recognized that there was a short-term fix that was needed. We needed to provide water for now and the next few years. We know, though, that the projects that we're working on now are not long-term. We need to look 50 or more years into the future. Clos Home, because of the size of that project, is more a long-term project. It's one of those longer-term 50-year projects. So once we get the immediate needs taken care of, which is what our focus is on now, and we're pushing staff daily, every meeting, we push them. Once these are in place, so we buy ourselves a little bit of breathing room, we're hoping that our committee, our community committee, will actually start looking at some of these bigger projects and bring those forward and help us in assessing those, so that we then look at the long term.
And one thing that we have decided as a board more recently that GM Rosenboom had in his presentation is looking at the groundwater and accessing aquifers, because they tend to be a little bit more cost effective than possibly looking at Clos Home, which is quite a distance away. And then also, or even in comparison to the reservoir, we are still continuing to look at the reservoir a little bit more closely to see how feasible it will be. But we've also expanded the groundwater search too, simply because of the cost. Remco?
Yeah, I would like to add to that the development of a groundwater well, as I indicated, even though we started testing this year, we could proceed with to start the permitting next year and start construction in 2022, and then have them completed in 2023, which is a 2.5, 3 year time window. While for a project like Clos Home, you can easily think about a 4 or 5 year permitting process with a 3-4 year construction phase afterwards. So in order to address the water supply deficit as estimated for 2025, Clos Home is not the most, does not fit in the timeline.
And then there is always there is another point with Clos Home too, that there are a number of water licenses that are already on Clos Home, and those need to be sorted out as well, because typically with water licenses, and Remco will correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's typically first come, first serve, correct?
First in time, first in right. So
yes,
the oldest license has the right to use that water, and nobody can take it away from them. In this case, there are some water licenses. All the amount of water that's available at Clos Home Lake in the summer is currently already allocated to another licensee. So we would need to have negotiations with that other license holder, which is Beach Hydro, that they don't need the water in the summer, and then we can use some excess water.
Mm-hmm. And it's important that we diversify the number of different sources that we are looking at, especially in this era of climate change. So nothing, like I said, nothing's off the table, but there's some things that are just a higher priority, and we will be looking at, as Mayor Seeger said, there's some things that are short-term and some that are long-term. And the most important thing is we need more water now. So, okay, on to our next question, please, Raf.
We have another question from D. McCreath. As a follow-up question, can you explain what public approval for a loan consists of?
What the alternative approval process is? I'm going to go, would our CFO like to field that question? Or would that be better for a corporate officer?
Yeah, if she's willing to go ahead. I know that her report is already drafted, which actually has the whole timeline and steps outlined. So I most certainly can, but if she's on the call, then.
Thank you. Yes, so local governments wishing to pursue long-term debt financing may only do so with approval of the electors. Public approval, we can achieve that in a few different ways, but commonly it's either through something called an alternative approval process or through a referendum. If you actually look at the upcoming agenda for the Corporate and Administrative Services Committee, which is happening this week on the 28th of May, you will see a report that outlines the process we are recommending to the board that we pursue for approval of the long-term loan for the Church Road well field.
Okay, thank you very much. So that voice from beyond, that was our corporate officer, Sherry Reed. Thank you. Okay, I hope that helps answer the question. And I certainly would advise looking at that, that report. It's very comprehensive. Okay, next question, please.
We have a question from John Henderson regarding the EFN. You won't get what you don't ask for. While there may be smolts or fingerlings, why not test the province's appetite for 120? This issue is perhaps less about one biologist's view and more about tactics to achieve the best outcome for our water supply.
Okay, Director McMahon.
I'm going to say that the water supply is very important, but our environment is also very important. Salmon are a keystone species of the West Coast. The salmon run in Chapman Creek is already very stressed. And I think that we cannot play fast and loose with our environment. So we need to make sure that it's safe. Hopefully, and this is my personal opinion, hopefully we will wean ourselves gradually off Chapman Creek water because it's only one stream. And we need to do a much better job of protecting all of our watersheds.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Remco, anything to add to that? Or
I can. What is, in response to the question, as part of this project and as part of the report that will follow from this project, we'll indeed clarify further if there isn't any opportunity to go below. Because I agree, if there's any opportunity for us to lower it below 150 and ensure that the juvenile fish are protected, we'll of course look at that. But I also know that the province, they have very strict policy and guidelines around allowing about the steps we need to follow in order to determine what an appropriate environmental flow need is. And based on those assessments, I'm not confident that it will be easy for us to prove within 1 year of monitoring that we can get below the 150. It could even require maybe a multi-year program to confirm that. So, while I agree that there might be opportunities, there might be always opportunities, but I don't know that creek all too well. Our contractor does. We need to look at it with open eyes, explore all the options, and then connect with the province to get their input. But I'm not hopeful at this point in time that it will be quick win for us to get an EFN lower than 150.
thank you, Remco. Back over to our list of questions, please.
We have a question from Andreas Ties. Could we take water coming from Clos Home downstream from the BC Hydro Dam?
Okay, that's a good one for our GM of infrastructure.
Downstream of the dam, there's the dam, then there's a big pipe that's feeding the water down, and at the bottom of the pipe is Salmon Inlet. So there is not a downstream of the dam. Downstream of the dam means downstream of the turbines that are currently producing the power for BC Hydro, and they're located at the shores of Salmon Inlet. So maybe there's an engineering solution possible there that water is directly piped to us. but that might be the only option available.
Thank you, Remco. Okay, over to staff for our next question.
There are currently no more questions in the written fields and no raised hands. If somebody wants to raise their hand, we can allow them to speak.
What about in the chat? In the chat function, is there any questions in there that we haven't? No?
They've been
Okay.
addressed.
All right. I see Dee McCreath with a raised hand.
Dee McCreath, you've been unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. McCreath, go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. It would seem to me in many ways that our groundwater resources may be the best long-term sustainable and robust resource that we have. Other than the single well test that you've done around current projects, has there been studies of the overall groundwater aquifer system in this area, recharge amounts, total sustainable recharges, that kind of thing? And are those reports available?
Okay, I'm going to go to our staff experts, and I know Donna, I think, has a little bit of background on this as well. So, Remco, can you speak to this, please?
Yes, sure. And I can start with that. We started working on the groundwater investigation program in 2017, and all reports related to our groundwater investigation are available on SCRD.ca. Water projects, and then groundwater investigation. And in 2017, we completed desktop study. In 2018, based on the desktop study, we identified 4 sites where that were potential good sites for the construction of a production well. And ultimately, one site we hit bedrock, so we're not able to find any water there. And 2 other sites, they were abandoned for other reasons. So we decided that from those 4, we were moving ahead with the Church Road Well project. The site where in 2018, where we hit bedrock, which is Great Creek, along the Seashell Inlet, we're going to explore that further this year, but in a different site in that same area, where we have a higher likelihood that there will be sufficient groundwater available, as well as we're developing plans to do that on 4 other sites in the coast. All the sites are primarily on the south side from Seashell, because north of Seashell there's a lot of arsenic and bedrock, so lesser productivity aquifers and potential higher risk of arsenic, finding arsenic in the water, while the aquifers we're exploring in the southern part of the coast are all the alluvial fans or existing alluvial fans from streams. So good recharge, high productive, and for all sites, we're exploring if there's any impacts on any nearby streams and creeks, to ensure that if there is an potential on those sites, there will be no impacts to any wildlife and fish that is present in the creek, and as well B, that if we draw from those aquifers, that we can maintain doing that for 20, 30, 40 years ahead, even if climate change would reduce the recharge of those areas.
Thank you.
Okay. Donna, did you want to add anything to that? Because I know you've looked into this quite a bit as well.
I don't have a whole lot. I would point out that the town of Gibsons did a very thorough aquifer study, and I would imagine that at least some of the material in there would be broadly applicable to other aquifers in this area. I mean, I really like the aquifers. All the great rain falls on our mountain all winter. We might as well enjoy it. It then filtrates through the earth, free filtration. Then it follows up out of the ground. We get at least a little bit of coming up out of the ground, and we only have to do minor treatment of the water at the well. So I think this is a win.
Thank you, Donna.
Terrific. Okay, Mr. McGrath, does that take care of your question?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for participating. We'll go over to staff for our next Q&A.
We have a few questions that have come up. The next one is from Citizen. When will Seashell be getting water meters, and why, as a measure to encourage water conservation, does the SCRD not supply rainwater barrels of a smaller size?
Okay, so I'm going to go to the mayor for the answer on water meters, because I think you touched on it earlier, and then I'll go over to Remco about why the water barrel conservation question. So Darnelda first.
When will Seashell be getting water meters? That is going to be coming back to us from staff for the board to determine if we're going forward with an AAP, so an alternative approval process, or a referendum. We did go out to the community last year before last, with an AAP for borrowing the money for water meters, and it got defeated. So personally, I'd say I think we need to do more communication with the community about the projects, which is what we're doing. At that time, the comments back from the community were that they wanted to see us moving forward with water projects. They wanted to see us working on supply before they would actually approve water meters. We've done that. We as Remco presented today, we're moving forward with a lot of projects. So I anticipate that the community will actually support moving forward with water meters if we go forward and ask them this time.
Okay, thank you, Darnelda. And then Remco, if you can answer the other piece about the water, the SCRD water rain barrels.
Thank you, Chair. We have the SCRD has a rainwater harvesting rebate program where residents can apply for a rebate up to $1,000 if they install a certain size rainwater collection system in their on their property. The size is significant. It's 1,000 or 2,000 gallons, and then those sizes are the size is selected because only then there's sufficient water stored on the property to actually ensure that during stage 3, stage 4 drought, the resident is able to adequately supply water to vegetables or flowers, etc., etc. Any smaller water supply, more the rain barrel size, of course, will provide some benefit, but won't really address the water supply issue during an extended drought for a lot of residents. And more information on the program is available on the SCRD website as well.
Okay. Okay. And I think it's important to note, and our CFO correct me if I get the details on this wrong, but the water rebate program for the rain barrels, it is actually it's offset by tax dollars. So it's actually it's taxation that that rebate money is coming from. So we want to make sure it's going to be a big bang for the buck, and that we're that it is an appropriate size. So Atina, I think that's a pretty...
Yeah, they're funded by the user fees of the regional North and South Pender system.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and next question, please.
A question from Megan. What has the uptake been for the rainwater harvesting rebate program, and do we have an understanding of how many households are actually collecting rainwater?
Okay, Remco?
I can talk about last 2 years, and in terms of the system, last 2 years the system were the funds were fully subscribed. So we issued about 30. We awarded about 30 rebates to residents. In total, the SCRD does not have a complete overview of all the residents that have rainwater harvesting systems at their properties. We only know the ones that we funded the last several years. This year's the uptake has been a little bit lower, but that partly coincided with the fact that the start of the rebate program and our communication around that 100% coincided with the start of the COVID pandemic. So I think there is but it's still open. So if there are residents that would like to get a rebate or a rainwater harvesting system, go to the website and the information is there to how to apply.
Thank you very much. Next question, please.
A question from Scott, follow-up question. We are now paying approximately $412 to the SCRD for water, North Pender, plus another $343.78 provincial. How much do we get back for the infrastructure? Over $755 per year over water only.
Can you repeat that, please? I just want to make sure I'm understanding. It's how much are we getting for that, for the 700 and some odd dollars that the individual is paying?
Yeah. The question, yeah, we have a follow-up here from Scott. Sorry, how much are we getting dollars back from the provincial government?
Okay, they're over to our CFO for that one then. And she can explain that.
Yeah, so I think, and Remco can definitely jump in. So a few years back, so maybe 3 years now, we received a very large grant from, it was a combined federal provincial grant, and it was over $3 million for the North and South Pender systems. So both of those were separated evenly, and we did a significant amount of water mains replacements. So that was the last time we just completed those projects last year. So we'll continue to search and have more grants. Prior to that, we've received very large infrastructure grants for the Area A Water Master Plan, which lasted several years and was what allowed us to be able to build the South Pender Harbor water treatment plant and do a lot of the infrastructure upgrades up in Pender Harbor. So if Remco wants to add anything.
Yeah, maybe. I think part of the question is also, in my presentation, I indicated that the parcel taxes are collected by the province and the municipalities, but they're collecting that on behalf of the SCRD. So those funds will ultimately be paid back by the province and the municipalities to the SCRD. So it's not that the parcel taxes for water are being paid to the province and nothing is going to the SCRD. That money is going back to the SCRD and is funding our major repairs, replacements, and any new infrastructure that the SCRD needs to build.
Okay, thank you. Okay, back over for our next question, please.
We have a question from Janice. Many residents of Seashelt have been opposed to getting water meters. Can you give us some examples for the public of how much water has been saved by identifying leaks in other areas? And can you quantify this?
Okay, so I'll go over to Remco or Donna. That is a Remco. I mean, I can give the one example that I know of up in the Pender Harbor area where there's an old family home that I know that has been there. They've been there for decades, and one section of the lawn always was damp. And it was almost swamp-like, and it was like that for years. And then the water meters were installed, and they discovered that there was an actual leak that was causing that damp area. And as soon as they fixed the leak, then the damp area just dried up because, and they would have never noticed that because there was no drop in pressure within the home. They had normal pressure within the home. And this is something that they don't even know when the leak would have started. They just always knew that there was this big section of lawn that was always damp. And Remco, I'll go to you to give a little more detail.
The little detail I can give on that example is that by fixing the leak, they also got rid of some mosquitoes in the summer. But it's very common for when we connect with residents about the fact that we have identified through our meter data that they have a leak, that they are surprised about the fact that they have so. A lot of residents are like, that's not the case. And then we say, based on the amount, you should check your garden hoses. And yep, there it is. The leaking hose bit, the leaking tap, leaking toilets are very common for us to identify. Those are the small ones, which are great to solve, but and that's the vast majority of the leaks we have. We are able to identify leaks that are over 10,000 liters a day, large leaks on large properties where often the resident does not even know exactly where the water mains runs from the road towards their house or other properties, other buildings they have. So it is really for us to, in the context of Sechelt, I can foresee that there would be quite some leaks, small leaks that are hidden in people's front yards that in itself are not a large volume, but altogether might be a significant volume. And on the larger properties, there will be some where people just are not aware of the fact that there is a leak. They don't even know where the line runs, but they'll find them. And it's not uncommon for that to take half year or a year to identify exactly where a leak is on a larger property. But it's very common for us to be able to work with the residents to find them together. And because that's what we do. It's about how can we help them to find them together.
Okay. And it's also another point, not just with hoses, but with toilets and faucets that may have a leak in them somewhere as well. It's incredible how much water is just essentially goes down the drain or down the toilet. I'm just going to bring in a little bit of a note from David Kroll, who's a counselor in the town of Gibsons, who's typed to us that the town of Gibsons went from 781 liters per capita per day in 2009 to 247 per capita per day in 2019 with meters. This includes residential, commercial, fire, and operational water use. So that's pretty incredible just with what the town of Gibsons has done. Darnelda?
Another point that I think is important to bring up, and that is that if we don't measure our water use, we can't actually quantify or identify ways that we can save water individually as a residence. We do have houses in Sechelt that have water meters. Most of the properties from 2016 on have had water meters put in. And as residents have been looking at their water use in their yards, they can actually look at how much they're using. If they change the irrigation system, they can see. But the rest of us who don't have water meters, we may believe we're saving water, using less water, but we don't know how much. And once we quantify that, once we can actually measure that and quantify it for ourselves, then we can look at where or when we want to reduce water even more. And it's part of that conservation mentality that water meters actually help with residents and in the whole community.
And just before I go to Remco, I just need to correct, David needed to, had accidentally typed 247. It's actually 347 liters. And then over to Remco, please.
I can only attest to the fact that last week I received my own water use for the last 12 months based on the new program just launched by the SCRD in terms of providing the monthly water updates. When I saw my trend over the year, I really was like, okay, what did I do in that month that was higher than that month? And that month overnight. I was thinking about when I installed my own rainwater harvesting system and how it impacted my my use. So it's just like with BC Hydro, if you know what you use, you can actually monitor and manage accordingly. And that's in addition to what Director Seegers was indicating. As long as you don't know what you're actually using, you're not able to actually realize how much you're using and how you can actually reduce your consumption and help the community solve their water supply situation crisis they're currently in.
Donna, did you want to comment as well, or?
Well, I got my water supply usage, which was really interesting because I didn't know how many liters a day we use in our household. How would I guess? So it was really instructive to find out. And the answer is that we use a little over 100 liters a day for my household of 2 people. But that's a very useful number now. And I feel like I'm getting a grasp on it. And more numbers will be better. I love numbers. So, and I will say that I've got the lowest usage of any director who's gotten their numbers to date, and so I can put a challenge out there. I defy any director to use less water than we do.
I need a water meter first.
Okay. Over to our next question, please.
A question from Matt McLean. I understand the goal is to not require stage 3 water restrictions by 2025. With all the projects on the table, how much of this water supply deficit is currently being addressed? How will the remainder be sourced?
Okay, I'm thinking Remco, you can handle this.
With the Church Road Wellfield, by the way, it's a good question. It's a question that it's constant on the forefront of everything we do because that's what our focus is, to address the water supply deficit for 2025. Currently, with the Church Road Wellfield, we're targeting at least 40%. We could end up a little bit higher, but that depends on some design that's currently work that's currently being undertaken. With the reduction in environmental flow need, we can achieve anywhere between 5-13%. So let's say that's another 5 to 10. So then on top of that, we have through the great work of the town of Gibsons that is currently drilling a 3rd well and building all kinds of infrastructure so that they can provide upper Gibsons, which we call Zone 3, which is currently getting water from the SCRD, and they're currently in a project to provide that with their own water. That saves another 7% of water supply to the SCRD. So in total, only with those current initiatives, we are exceeded 50%, but it's still 50%. So in order for us to really get close to that 100%, things that will really make the difference are increased water conservation by installation of by the full implementation of a water metering program, including meters in shear shelled and a volumetric rate system. And we need a well or 2 wells that combined result in production equal to a Church Road Wellfield, which is currently 40. So if you have another 40 on top of that, then you got 80, and then the other measures will make it up to 100. So it's clear that we need at least 1 more well of the size of the same size that current 2 wells that we're drilling at Church Road is able to provide, or a combination of 2 wells that will provide the same volume.
Okay. Thank you. So a question, Remco, that actually I was texted earlier by somebody who's listening in is, how do we determine how many wells you need to drill to provide a source?
Good question. Good question. In the case of Church Road, we started with drilling 1 well, and we tested the well, and we determined that actually the aquifer, we were contemplating that the aquifer could actually handle higher volume than that we could extract from the diameter of pipe we put in there. We put in a small size, and there's only so much water you can draw from a small pipe. So we had to install a second pipe to actually get a sufficient amount of water, a good amount of water out of that aquifer without impacting the sustainability of the aquifer or the nearby creek. And that's actually, so what we're actually targeting is how can we maximize production on a site without causing any impacts to nearby residents, nearby commercial users, creeks, as well as the long-term production of the well. So it's not that we're actually targeting a volume, it's more how can we maximize the volume without impacting anything else.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, over to staff for another question, please.
We have a question from Connie Jordison at the local. Does the SCRD have projections for water use rate increases in 2021 and 2022?
Excellent. Okay, Tina or Remco, who would like to take this?
Well, we, as part of the report and the draft IEP that's going forward for the Church Road program, we do know that as it stands today, with current MFA rates, to sustain that borrowing of up to $9 million, it would mean an additional approximate $35 per household for increase of parcel tax. Now, we review the rates annually as part of the budgeting process, as GM Rosenboom outlined at the presentation. And the reason why we do that is because it is contingent on the projects that are moving forward and what are the amounts we need to fund those particular projects coming forward. So because we haven't quite started the budgeting process for 2021, the known and unknowns are not quite there yet, but the known right now is if we are successful with the borrowing. And of course, if we move forward with a borrowing for the metering program, that too is approximately, I think, $8 million. So again, it would about double. So we can expect that as we move forward, we could have another up to $100 increase per household, but that depends whether or not it's parcel tax or user fees.
Remco, did you want to add into that?
Yeah. The only thing I would like to add to that is that it's really dependent on the number of projects that we want to move forward next year, what the increase will be. What our CFO is outlining are some things that are currently in the pipeline. But I think that in order for us to advance, for example, the wells, any of the well sites that we're currently developing or testing, more funds are needed there as well. So it will really be part of the 2021 budget process that will start late this summer. That will build up towards what will be that ultimate number.
Okay, thank you, Darnelda.
So a question I'm sure somebody's going to ask is, if we get grants, right? If we're lucky enough to get grants for some of these projects, then how does that impact the rates or not? Like the user rates or parcel tax.
So of course we would just obviously factor that into the rate modeling, and that would definitely ease the burden for either a parcel tax or user fee.
And go ahead, Remco.
Yeah, maybe maybe in addition to, we were just talking about grants and water supply projects, and I want to maybe elaborate a little bit more on what currently the requirements are for grants, and that is that any infrastructure grant from the province or the federal government currently expects that a local government already has water meters installed in the area, and they see that as just as best practices that are installed prior to you even asking for additional funds to expand your water supply, because it's they are viewing it as a necessity to have a good handle on your water conservation and your water use, that water meters are in place. So we've explored options for grants for Church Road, etc. And the response we received back was, you need to have a plan in place to also get your meters installed in the seashore area. So that's why there is a combination between applying for grant. There is a connection between applying for grants and implementing meters in the seashore area.
Terrific, thank you. Moving over to staff for our next question, please.
A question from Tom. Does REMCO think that there may be leaks in the water mains and sea shelf which are not visible from the surface? And is there any thought about investigating this possibility?
Okay, well, because I don't read REMCO's mind, I'll pass that one over to him.
Yes. Given the number of, there will be leaks in sea shelves, just like, as I just indicated elsewhere, that there will be smaller leaks that we're not able to see from the ground. They are not resulting in wet surfaces, wet soil. It's just the water that's leaking from those mains or those lines is just going through the groundwater, and we never see it. And I'm just referring to mains. So when we look at our main distribution system, so the water mains that are running underneath the roads to supply the water to the communities, those are being monitored by the SCRD, and as part of the metering program, we currently also are testing new technology to how to advance our own the leak detection in our own system. So while we are looking at where we are focusing on the leaks on the private side, on people's residences, properties, we're also looking at what can we do to improve the detection mechanisms in the SCRD's primary distribution system.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please.
A question from Brenda Rowe. What is considered with regards to deciding to go for a second attempt at AAP versus referendum for Seashelt meter project?
Okay, who would like to? Darnelda, do you want to try this one?
I have no idea. I know that when the alternative approval process was done before, like I say, the residents in Seashelt wanted to see projects moving forward. And so they very easily jumped on board and said, no, we're not going to give you the ability to borrow. Part of what the community engagement is that we've done last year and this year is to make sure that the community knows we are moving forward with these projects. So there is a difference in cost between an AAP and a referendum. I don't know the actual dollar values. I think it's like $20,000, $30,000 difference in cost, somewhere in that ballpark, and staff can correct me on that. So if we can get approval with an alternative approval process, it's a cheaper way for us as a regional district to go. If we do not get support with an alternative approval process, we still have the option to go out and do a referendum with the community. So it gives us that option as well. So staff can correct me on the cost.
Donna, and then maybe Remco or Dina.
I was just going to say that I'm looking forward to this conversation at the board. because this is something that's been kind of hovering out there for a number of months. And so I of course will look forward to leadership from Seashell, who are experts on Seashell.
I'll tell you personally, I mean, this will come out at the board meeting. Personally, I'd rather go to referendum, straight to referendum, and not do an AAP for the meters. But we'll see what the conversation is.
Okay. Remco Artina. Remco, I see you've unmuted.
In terms of cost, the cost for a referendum are really a referendum, organizing referendum is the same process for us to organize an election. So with election polling, with polling stations all over the coast, and that's where the costs are. That's where the costs are in. Well, for an AAP, we don't need to develop such a big organization.
Tina, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, it's essentially, I mean, this is what we would outline in the report coming forward, and it really depends on timing. Sometimes people combine referendums for efficiencies through an election. However, that might not be feasible with the timing of this, because the next election is not until 2022. So I think we want to get on with it a little bit sooner than that. So yeah, so most certainly the cost is much more significant. So if we equate it to kind of what we spent last year, it's in the 30 to 50, depending on how much public consultation, it could go all the way up to $60,000. So an alternate approval process. Don't have the cost right in front of me here, but probably far less than 10,000.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question, please.
The question is from Clint Budd to Dean. How has the whole drive for water impacted you in your relatively new job?
Oh. Over to Dean.
Thank you for the question, Clint. It's interesting. When I first was approached about the possibility of this position, and even in my interview with the board, I made it very clear how important water supply and water conservation was on the Sunshine Coast. And coming from northern BC, where water supply and so forth isn't as big of an issue as it is here, it was something that I had to get acquainted with very quickly. And one of the things that I've noticed, even though I haven't been here a long time, is in the short time I have been here, my own behavior around water usage has changed significantly. And it's interesting. It doesn't take long before you start to be conscious of how long you're running the tap, how often you're using the hose, how much water are you putting on those plants. And for myself and my wife and our daughter that's still at home, we start to be conscious of showering for less time. And it just seems to be part of life on the Sunshine Coast. I'm already starting to get acquainted with when is this water restriction going to go to the next level. I find myself wishing for rain more than I used to. Even though it's the Sunshine Coast, I was welcoming the rain on Sunday in a way that I typically wouldn't be on a weekend. So I don't know that it's impacted me, but it's definitely influenced my behavior. And it's definitely very front of mind for all of us as staff in supporting the strategic plan of the board, and water supply and conservation being so important in terms of its overall priority on the Sunshine Coast.
Thank you. I will say, am very happy to see it rain. And one of my friends, she will call me on mornings when it's rained the night before, and she's like, "It rained for you, Lori. It rained for you." So it's definitely something that is forefront. And right now, we're really happy when we see some rain, because it provides some extra moisture for all of those gardens that we know are out there. Next question, please.
The question from Deadbeater Dev: can we convert seawater into drinking water using technology?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is it's very expensive. But Remco, I think you've had some experience with this.
Yes, it is expensive. Yes, the technology is out there. it is definitely something that I think it is one of those projects that while we're talking about long-term planning, preparing ourselves for future decades, um, what can we do with Clos Home? It is really the long-term planning that I think this is the desalination of seawater that we need to look into that option because we have plenty of seawater around us and we're short on fresh water. So if there's any way we can transfer one into the other, yes, we need to look at it. We need to assess the feasibility. What is the high costs are primarily associated with the energy required to make the transition from salt to fresh. It's a very costly to do that, and for example, where places where they do it, they often build a solar farm next to it just to be able to provide the power to run the desalination plants. However, we shouldn't throw it out when we're thinking about long-term plans because if in case our groundwater wells that we currently are drilling are not looking as promising, are not turning out as promising as we currently would hope that they would be, we might be in a situation that we need to look at those kind of currently maybe out of the box concept as well in order to supply to ensure water supply for the future decades.
And it's certainly something when you look at where we're going as a globe and in the era of climate change and how much we're losing, ice pack and glaciers. It's certainly something that we need to be looking at sooner rather than later. Do we have any more questions?
Yes, we have 2 questions. The next one is a friend of mine from Carolina. A friend of mine got a letter saying there is a leak in her water system and she doesn't know where to start and is not prepared to pay a lot of money to find out. Will the SCRD help find the leak for residents?
Okay. Remco, I do know that we do actually have some tips on our that are put out through social media and on our website about how to discover, for example, if you're not sure where the leak is, you could start with your toilet, like maybe putting some food coloring in the tank to see if it goes into the bowl when the toilet's not in use. Remco, would you like to carry on?
I can carry on. Our staff can help residents and do help residents to the max of their ability. They're not able to, if there's a leak on the property and it is, for example, there are different steps. By shutting off certain valves in your house at certain points, you can identify where a leak is. If the main water shut off, if the main water shut off in your house is shut off and there's still water leaking, then it must be between your house and the road. And staff can help, and the tips that share identified on our website can help residents with several steps how they can test where can help them figure out where the leak actually is. And the actual repair of the leak and any digging that in the front yard or whatever that is required, that is really up to the property owner themselves to pay for and arrange for.
Okay. So yes, we're here to help. Okay, over to our next question, please.
We have another question from Deadbeater Dev. Why do we not use rainwater harvesting on a large scale?
I think, okay.
I'm going to address this for Seashell first.
Okay.
So one of the things that we're doing in Seashell is we're looking at our building code, basically our building bylaw and our subdivision and development control bylaw. Currently, we don't address any of these cisterns, rainwater catchment systems, gray water. We don't address any of that inside of our current bylaws, our current infrastructure development systems and processes. So that is something coming forward this year. We're going to be looking at that with the community. So watch for those to come out if you live in Sechelt. We're going to want your input into what you want to see in those bylaws so that we can look at potentially having people putting in cisterns or gray water systems, etc., inside of our subdivisions to make use of that water that falls in the, over the winter, in early spring, to collect it and use it.
I'm going to go to Donna, and then I'll go over to Remco.
Mount Elphinstone is a wonderful rainwater harvesting system. It catches all those rain clouds all winter long, and it filters all that water down into the aquifer, and we take advantage of it. And it's a lot better and more efficient than trying to put a tank on my roof, just in my opinion.
And it's interesting, Director Lee from Area A also commented that, technically it is all rainwater harvesting. Remco, over to you.
I can agree with Director McMahon in terms of our mountains are perfect rainwater catchment systems, and large-scale rainwater harvesting is larger than on an individual property. It's just not economically feasible. It is so much infrastructure is required to collect all the water. Yes, on a big roof you can do it, but for multiple roofs, it's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger cost. So at that point in time, it's way more cost effective to look at other options, how you can store water in the summer, in the spring, so you can use it in the summer. And that's actually the concept, the same concept we're exploring with our raw water reservoir. Is during the summer the spring freshet when the snow is melting, how can you, and it's still raining, how you can capture that water to be used later in the summer?
Okay, thank you. Next question, please.
A question from Alton Toth. Are the distance from wells to large mains given consideration when deciding which projects will be pursued? Church Road will have multiple kilometers of new mains going in. Grey Creek would be the same, wouldn't it?
Remco?
Yes. Yes and yes. I can explain a little bit more.
Okay.
We try to look for wells as closely to our current infrastructure as possible, so that because water mains are extremely expensive to replace. And when I say extremely expensive, it really depends on the amount of rock blasting, etc. required. But for example, the Pender water mains we did last year in North and South Pender, we're getting closer to $1,000 a meter length in that range. While in other areas we can easily be in the $400 or $500 range. So any kilometer of water main that we are not that's not required to be replaced or upsized in order for us to get the amount of water from a new well is really beneficial. So yes, upsizing water mains, replacing water mains is or constructing new ones is a big consideration for us in terms of the actual cost for the construction of a water main of new supply project.
Donna?
Yeah, I'll just point out on behalf of Area F that the water main on Elphinstone Avenue is long overdue for replacement. So an advantage of this project is that we're hitting two ducks with one stone. We're getting some water main replacements that were needed anyway. And hopefully we can do some road fixes while we're at it too, but that's another topic.
That's another topic involving another ministry. Excellent. Do we have any more questions?
There are no more questions.
Anyone? I see a hand up.
The number 7838 has been unmuted.
It's Tom Lamb from Seashell.
Hello, what's your question?
Well, I don't have a question. I just have a minor little fact. So if you have a family of 4 in Seashell, you need a 2,000 square foot roof. You need to have a cistern of 140,000 cubic meter, 140,000 needs to hold 140,000 liters of water. And that will be able to sustain your family, a family of 4, if they watch their water use. The problem that you run into is filtering and making that water potable water, especially even rainwater, because you have things like pollen this time of year, all the debris, everything that comes out of the air that lands on your roof has to be filtered out of the water before you can use it. But just a minor little incidental thing to leave you thinking about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Any comments on what Tom had to say?
The only comment I want to make is that what we see on the coast in terms of the people, residents that are using rainwater harvesting system, the vast majority is using them for external use, garden use, etc. So it's really for vegetables, flower beds, and some are using it, I know, also for actually cleaning their boats, etc. But as Councilor Lamb of Seashell indicated, using it for domestic use in-house requires a lot of treatment. It can be done, but it's a different ballpark.
Mm-hmm. And one comment I would like to make about the gray water usage within the home is it's currently not within the building code as a requirement. However, I do know we have an elected person on the coast who did, when he built his home, actually build a gray water system into the home so that he can collect, their home collects the rainwater and then uses that for gray water, or uses that for gray water usages such as flushing toilets, for example. So it's less expensive to do it as you're building a home than it is to retrofit a home. And over to next question.
That is all the questions we have.
Okay. I do have a comment I see from David Kroll, from councillor from the town of Gibsons and also an SCRD director. You would also need a backup system so you can periodically clean your reservoir. Okay, we have 7 minutes left. So if there's anyone that wants to put in a question or another comment, or oh, and I should note, gray water systems may not currently be available, allowed by VCH. Remco, can you comment on that? Or Dean, do we know for sure on that? About gray waters?
They are allowed, but there are strict requirements to be met. And it's, for example, they can be used for flushing toilets, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Looked like Donna had something she wanted to say.
Oh, Donna, go for it.
Sure. I just wanted to say that, water is top of mind for all of us. Like many people this spring, food security was on my mind. And I was also at home for, I think it was only like 8 or 10 weeks, but it felt a lot longer. And so I planted a lot more vegetable garden than I usually do. We expanded our planting. So I'm keeping an eye on my garden because, like many other people, and I hear this all the time from residents in my area, I'm worried that we will have water restrictions and I will have to watch my garden shrivel up and die. And that would be just so disheartening for so many people. So we're doing our very best to do whatever we can about the water supply this year, though it's going to be mostly conservation this year, and to expand it as soon as we can, because we need abundant water, not just for washing sidewalks and boats. We need it for our home environments here, for our vegetable gardens, for our beautiful shrubs. And I do hear from gardeners as well. So it's really important. It's our top priority, I think, at the SCRD.
Yeah, and I think when the board took the stance last year with prioritizing food producing plants and shrubs, or plants, shrubs, bushes, that food production above lawns. I think that was a very key message as well. And one thing to note, Director Toth has just sent us a message as well. And it's important to note that this problem wasn't created in 1 year. It can't be solved in 1 year. We're doing our best, and we're working really hard, and constantly looking for the next option to move this all forward. Less lawns, more squash. Yes, Donna. I also see there's a question that we'll have to take offline, because we're just starting to wrap up here, because it goes on to septic on Sunnyside so that's a question for Donna about septic on Sunnyside, if you look in the chat there. But otherwise, we're out of questions. Am I correct?
The Sunnyside Road septic field was the last question.
Okay. Donna, do you want to address that right now, or do you, and then I'll wrap it up.
For some reason, I can't see that one in my chat.
Okay.
The question was, any comments on Sunnyside Road septic field?
Oh, there. Sorry. Good question. I believe staff are working their way through all of these small sewer plants. And I think what we need to have in that case is a meeting with residents to talk about options. That's a very, very small system. And the question is, how much will it cost to rebuild the system versus is it possible for the residents to go it on their own? There's only 11 parcels served, and I believe 7 current users on that system. So it's very, very small.
Okay. Remco, I saw your hand wave there. Did you want to add to that, or is that?
Yeah, I can add to that. I know that our CFO, Tina, could do that as well, but we had meetings planned in June and July with all the all the members of the systems. And we're currently, due to the COVID, we had to reconsider those meetings, and we're currently in the process of finalizing our plans how to engage with all the residents of all the wastewater systems over the summer in a different way, most likely virtual.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we're at 8:28, so and we're through our questions. I'm going to look to our panelists to see if you have any final comments or thoughts before we wrap it up. No, okay, Darnelda?
Well, yeah, sure. I want to say congratulations to staff for how smooth this went. You obviously did a lot of work behind the scenes. This was seamless, no technology glitches. I'd like to thank the people in the gallery too for coming forward with good questions. And I look forward to further questions as this is posted and people in the community watch.
Excellent. Yes, and Donna?
Yeah, really great presentation, Remco, and I hope it will be up on the SCRD website real soon now.
It will be going up on the YouTube channel live. We've just heard from SCRD, and the recording will be available for viewing. So, so that's fantastic. It'll be there. And yes, Remco?
And the presentation will be posted tomorrow as an independent file as well. So if people only want to review the presentation, they can do so.
Wonderful. Terrific. Okay, so I'm not seeing any of the other panelists jumping up to say anything else. So oh, Donna?
Motion to adjourn?
No, it's not an official, no, don't. So with that, we are at 8:30. I am going to wrap us up and say thank you to everyone that's attended here tonight. If, as we said, if you have more questions, we'd love to hear them. And we look forward to continued conversations, even though it may be virtual and physically distanced. We're still trying to get out and listen and hear and answer your concerns. Thank you to the panelists for being here tonight, to all of the other elected that were on listening, and of course our team behind the scenes, our IT, our water team, our corporate officer, our CFO, CAO, and our GM of infrastructure. Thank you all for being here tonight, and really appreciate this, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. So everyone take care, and thanks for having us in your home tonight. Good night, everyone.